we will get we'll get stuck in. So yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. You're all very welcome. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, thanks very much for joining, and for you that have supported us before, thanks for the ongoing support. Great to have you all with us this lunchtime as we get into our new 2021 rhythm of quarterly webinars. This one's set to be our biggest webinar yet, so yeah, thanks everyone for signing up and showing interest. Our topic today then for the next 45 minutes is conversion rate optimization. So we're going to dig in and think about how we can drive conversion by solving problems for our users. So the team on the webinar today is myself, I'm Mel, and I'm Head of Planning at Fathom, and I'm joined by Gareth, our CEO.
Hi everybody, I'm Gareth and I'm CEO at Fathom.
Super, cheers Gareth. So just before we get stuck in, we have some insights from our 2020 webinar series that we wanted to share. So over 1,500 of you joined us from all across the globe, across 9 webinars in total. And it was really great just to see such a variety of people across various job roles participate as well. We have a hashtag for today's webinar. It's hashtag UXBytes, and our Twitter handle, as you can see on the screen there, is @Fathom_UX. So if anything resonates with you today, or if you find any nuggets throughout the information that we share, or indeed if you just want to prove to your boss that you were here, then please tweet us. Okay, so here's how the next 45 minutes is shaping up. So we've got a little bit of theory to begin with, and then we will we'll share a practical case study. So first up, we're going to think about how design can help us to solve problems for our users. Then we're going to begin to deconstruct the e-commerce journey. We'll chat a little bit about the craft of changing user behavior, and then we'll share that practical case study. Very lastly then, we'll spend the last 15 minutes of our time together today in Q&A. So please feel free to pop your questions in the little question box as they come to you. We might not get through all of them today, but we will do our very best. And as always, we will follow up on our blog, which will be released early next week. Best way to keep in touch with us, and on top of when that blog will be released, is on Twitter. So again, please follow us on @Fathom_UX if you don't already. All right, so I'm going to give over and hand over to Gareth to get stuck into the content.
Great, Mel. Thank you very much for introducing all that we're going to cover in the next half hour, and thanks for just teeing up the subject or teeing up the topic so that those of you who have joined us can get a good sense of what we have lined up. So as you know, we're going to be thinking about conversion rate optimization over the next half hour, and we're going to be thinking about conversion within the context of design thinking. The discipline of conversion rate optimization is nothing new. It's been around for a long time, and lots of different types of organizations approach it and think about it in slightly different ways. And what we wanted to do today was to begin to ask the question, what does design thinking have to contribute to the art of conversion rate optimization? What techniques or methodologies, what ways of thinking that are inherent to design thinking, how can they be applied to help us do better conversion, to get better results from the digital products that we are responsible for designing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use digital thinking as my framework, and I'm going to go through some of the processes and ways of thinking that design thinking encompasses, and then apply those to conversion rate optimization. And that's kind of reflected in the agenda which Mel has just taken us through. So let's kick off with one of the central tenets of both design thinking and conversion rate optimization, which is the simple idea that we primarily see our role as designers as problem solvers, and that the more elegantly, the more efficiently, the more quickly, the more naturally we can solve problems for the users, then the happier they will be, and the more likely they are to behave in a way that they get value and benefit from the product that we have designed for them. And I'm not going to take a deep dive into problem solving today, because we've covered it on previous webinars, but I do want to think about some of the promises of problem solving. And I want to kind of start by giving you some clues about why UX professionals spend a lot of time talking about problems, why we discipline ourselves not to think about the solution until we've understood the problem. Why is it that we go on about problems so often. What is the power of problems and how do they apply to CRO? Well, I'll start by quoting a wiser man than me, Albert Einstein, who tells us that if he had an hour to think about a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about a problem and 5 minutes thinking up solutions. And one of the things that consistently amazes us as we do our work in Fathom is that when you invest time in a problem, what happens is that the solution just becomes more and more and more narrowly focused. The more you understand the job that your interface or the job that your product has to do, the more effectively and with greater precision can you design that for which you are responsible for doing. So there's something very powerful about understanding problems in detail. One of our favorite quotes in this is a quote which says, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." I wonder, have you ever had a situation in real life where you have been stuck, you can't do something, you don't know how to get somewhere, or there's something is confusing you, and you decide you're going to get help from someone, and so you invite your spouse or your friend or your brother, and you say, "Oh, like I'm having this problem," and you start to explain the problem, and as you start to explain the problem, the solution comes to you. I used to be a programmer many years ago, and we used to have this phrase called the cardboard programmer. And what that meant was you'd be stuck on a piece of code, you'd bring one of your colleagues over, you'd start to explain why you were stuck, and in the process of explaining why you were stuck, the solution would come to you. And this idea of a cardboard programmer was, if you called your colleague over and they were busy, they would sometimes say to you, "Well, have you spoken to the cardboard programmer first?" So I relay that just to reinforce that there's something very effective, there's something very powerful about understanding a problem that we're seeking to solve in detail. There's something very effective about deconstructing the role of design into its constituent parts. Now, how does this apply to e-commerce? It applies in the following way. At a top level, the problem that e-commerce wants to solve is to make it easy for users and make it easy for potential customers to buy stuff. That is the top level problem. But the more we think about that problem and the more that we think about the sub problems which sit below that and the sub goals that users have along the way, then the better chance we have of moving them as far as we possibly can along that sales funnel. So when we talk about problem solving, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to close the gap between what it is that we have built and what we have on offer and all of the things all of the problems that our users need to solve in order to be able to buy the product. Now, the reason that this gap is important and the reason that it's critical to understand our users' problems is because there is a very significant chasm between how we understand our products and services and how our customers understand our products and services. By the very nature of the fact that we work in certain industries or we have knowledge in certain areas, we just amass knowledge and industry insight and information that our users simply don't understand or don't have access to. So we got to plug this gap to make sure that how we think we are treating our customers and how we are actually treating our customers are one and the same. Probably the most famous research in this area came from about 10 years ago when Bain and Company asked 326 Fortune 500 CEOs, "Is your customer experience superior?" Now, when they asked CEOs, 80% of CEOs said, "Absolutely, our customer experience is superior. It's a central part of how we provide competitive advantage, and it's hardwired into how we do business." Bain and Company then asked the customers of those Fortune 500 companies the same question. Is the customer experience that you are enjoying from this organization, would you describe it as superior? How many customers said yes? Well, only 8% of customers said yes. So when we think about problem solving through design, whether that's the design of a service or whether it's the design of a digital product, what we're going after here is we're trying to understand the world through the lens of the customer. We're trying to understand the world through what they see and the problems that they have and what matters to them in order to bridge that gap from the 80 to 8%. So that's the first thing. Deconstructing the problem helps us understand all of the things that our design needs to achieve for our users. So park that problem solving thought for a moment, if you will, and we're going to go on now to think about e-commerce, and we're going to try and do a little bit of deconstructing online shopping. Now, I should say conversion rate optimization does not apply only or solely to e-commerce. As it turns out, today we're going to focus on e-commerce, but in future webinars, we're going to think about business to business, lead gen. We're going to think of software as a service onboarding. We're going to think about what conversion means in the context of users seeking online support. It means different things, but for today, the case studies that we're going to focus on are all going to be around e-commerce. One of the few benefits of being in this industry a long time is that we have a vague recollection of what it was like at the very start. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to tell you a story that's going to sound a little bit like Grandad from Only Fools and Horses. It's a kind of a during the war type story. So my story comes from the 1990s, which is my equivalent of during the war stories. So I got involved in web design around 96, 97. So it really was at the very, very start. And when the web came along, early pioneers very quickly recognized that it gave them new routes to market and new opportunities to serve their customers. I think back 25 years ago, none of us had an idea of just the extent to which it would dominate our lives. But nonetheless, back then, early pioneers wanted to start to sell stuff online, get direct to customers, and use this new channel. And amongst those early adopters were organizations such as Levi, Gap, and other kind of well-known brands, clothing brands predominantly. So they built e-commerce websites, they put their products on the site, and they got to work selling their products through their website. But they noticed something. And what they noticed was that on their websites, loads of people would go find products, add the products to the basket, begin the process of checking out, but not complete checkout. Now, whilst it's a very familiar phenomenon in 2021, back in 1996, 97, 98, this was just completely foreign because Gap and Levi and these guys had been retailing on the high street for decades, and they never ever had a shopping cart abandonment problem. You know, you would never go through a Gap store or a Levi store and see lots of shopping carts or little baskets with products in them left abandoned at the checkout or left abandoned in the store. It just happened very rarely. It just wasn't a problem that used to happen. And so this issue of shopping trolley abandonment was identified. And in the mid to late 90s, the analysts got to work to try and understand what is it about shopping trolley abandonment that we need to understand? Why does it happen? How can we stop it? And some of the early pioneers were these two guys here. These are two brothers, and they're called the Eisenberg brothers. And these guys would have been the main kind of analysts in the late 1990s as they began to think about shopping trolley abandonment and what does it mean for web design. And they went after wanting the answer to the question, why do users abandon carts and abandon trolleys? And what they did was they went about deconstructing the problem. They went about saying, if a user is to convert on an e-commerce website, and the overall problem to be solved is that they want to buy a product, so they've got to know what the product is, how much it costs, when they get it, how they pay. If the overall thing is buying a product, what are all the problems that the site needs to solve in order to fulfill that buying a product? So they identified the 6 stages of conversion. They thought about, here are all the sub goals, the sub problems, which the website has to solve for the user. And here they are. Step number 1, find the user needs to arrive on the site and they need to know that they are in the right place. So an e-commerce website is going to sell anywhere from one product to tens of thousands of products. So the way that page is constructed through imagery and content and positioning needs to assure the user that they are probably in the right place to get the product that they are looking for. That is its first job. Its second job then is to help the user get as quickly as they possibly can from all of the products that are on offer to the subset of products that the user is interested in. So there's huge amounts of comparing and filtering and finding required to get the user from the 5,000 products that you sell to the 3 or 4 pairs of jeans that they are interested in, or the 3 or 4 pairs of glasses, or the 3 or 4 shirts, or whatever it is that you're selling. You got to get your user to the subset of your products that they are interested in as quickly, easily, efficiently as you possibly can. So that's the second set of goals. And that focuses on finding and selecting. But once the user has identified that subset, their attentions then turn to detail. They become hugely interested in detail. And this is one of the many reasons why it drives me nuts when people say things like, oh, users don't read on the web. Of course they read on the web. They don't read the way they traditionally read books. But when you're wanting to buy a phone or a piece of electronic equipment, or even something clothing, you get interested in the detail of that product because you want to know what's the length of the trousers, what's the fabric, what's the fit, what's the waist size, how do they compare to those other trousers. You become really interested in detail. So as we move to sections 3 and 4 of conversion, the problems that we have to solve are problems around comparison. Does the user prefer shirt A or shirt B? Do they prefer handset model B or handset model A? The goals there are around comparison and detail and decision making. That then takes us to stage 5, which is all around checkout. And we know from years of being at this and from looking at analytics and from running usability tests, is that whilst stages 1 to 4 are considered and careful, once the user gets to checkout, they cannot get out of there quickly enough. They are emotionally committed to buying what is in their basket, and they just want to get the job done. And that is why things like, checking out with PayPal, your Google account, remembering some of your payment details, that is why they are all such conversion enhancers, because emotionally the user has bought the thing and they just want out of there. And the final piece then is fulfillment. The user needs to know that it's going to be fulfilled, when the goods are going to arrive, what postage and package is going to cost, what the returns policy is. That becomes part of the conversion process as well. So what the Eisenberg brothers have done is they have taken this top goal, which is, the user wants to buy a product, and they've deconstructed it into the sub problems that need to be solved, and they give us a framework for decision making. It's a framework for information architecture. It's a framework for content strategy and flow. It is a framework for how the user moves through the system. So all the things that comprise the product design builds into this framework to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what it is that's being sold. Now, Mel is kindly helping me with a poll, which I hope you can see on your screen. Zoom isn't allowing me to share my screen and see the poll at the same time, folks, but I hope you can now all see a poll. And the poll is asking you to identify which of those 6 areas do you think has the biggest impact on conversion. So just take a minute, have a look at the poll, and try and work out which of those has the biggest impact. I'm going to briefly stop sharing my screen so I can hopefully get a look at the poll. But go ahead and fill in the poll.
Gareth, I don't think we can see the poll.
Okay, sorry, I think I've just launched it there now.
Super.
Thank you, folks. Okay, I can see some answers coming through, which is great, folks. Oh yeah, this is more like it now. The voting is in full swing. Okay, brilliant. I'll just give you a few more seconds, folks. Okay, so those numbers are just starting to settle down a little bit. So what you can see is that there's the winner is 45%, the checkout flow itself. You can see that there are pieces then maybe 45% before checkout, and then 5% on fulfillment. So let me share the results of what the Eisenberg brothers discovered all of those years ago. And thank you to those of you who have filled in the poll. Okay, back to our friends, the Eisenberg brothers. So they had identified these 6 stages of conversion, as we talked about. Here is the big reveal in terms of what they found when they carried out that program. Here it is: 60% of the reasons that people were abandoning their shopping cart was to do with the experience that they had been given before they got to checkout. What that means is that only 20% of issues are to do with the checkout itself, and 20% of the issues are to do with order fulfillment themselves. So what the Eisenberg brothers described or found out was, we're kind of looking in the wrong place. It's not that the checkout isn't important. It accounts for 1/5 of lost conversions. but it's the experience before the checkout, which is the single biggest determinant of how likely our users are to go ahead and check out. And what that tells us is that if we build e-commerce websites, we've got to work hard to make sure that they've solved the problems, that they've solved the finding problems, they've solved the selection problems, they've solved the comparison problems, and they've solved the detailed decision-making problems. But what it also does is it gives us a framework for thinking about this. It allows us to, when we look at the overall issue of improving conversion, it gives us a framework to work out all of the small problems that we want to solve, which ultimately will solve the big problem. And let me talk you through that. It allows us to have a look, for instance, at our funnel. And we can see that even though ultimately our conversion will be defined by that completion percentage at the end, that completion percentage itself is made up of all of the percentages that go before it. So it's just simply too crude to go after that final number, because that final number is driven from lots of numbers that warm up to that. But as well as that, it also then gives us a framework for thinking about the influences, because we can deconstruct, find, select, decide, cart, checkout, fulfill. We can deconstruct those in such a way that we can identify the things which influence conversion across each piece. So let's look at that same funnel in a slightly different way. If we have a look at find abandonment, here are the key factors which influence find abandonment: traffic sources, SEO performance, content strategy, and so on. What about selection? Well, it's a different set of factors, but it remains a relevant set of factors. Similarly, decision making, you can see some of the key elements around decision making, some of the key elements around the cart, some of the key elements around checkout and around fulfillment. So what we're doing here, going back to the topic of the webinar, design thinking for conversion optimization, is we're thinking about what matters to the user at each stage and the things which influence their behavior, which will determine whether or not they get further and they go longer into the flow. You'll see as well as that, we have identified times where there's opportunities to compare things like the cart, things like fulfillment against industry averages. And what we then do in Fathom is we've got a set of techniques which we typically use if we find through analytics that the issue is a finding issue. Well, then you'll see here that analytics reviews and usability testing is a very good place to start to try and solve that problem. If we find that the issue is to do with selection, well, then we find that navigational research such as card sorts and tree tests are useful. If it's to do with decision making, we find that content auditing and A/B testing, and so on and so on. So when we think about what role, how does design thinking contribute to CRO, contribute to conversion rate optimization, the second thing that I want to encourage you to think about in the context of e-commerce is that it's really critical to deconstruct the problem, to really understand the problem in detail, because once you deconstruct it, you can start to solve it, and you give yourself a chance of benefiting from the cardboard programmer, of being able to understand in granular terms all of the things that need to add up in order to get that conversion. So that's the second thing. Final little block of theory, and then we can close, taking us up to the half hour with a case study. So the final thing that I want to kind of introduce, so the first thing was the importance of problem solving. The second thing was the importance of deconstructing the experience into its component parts. And then the third thing that I want to speak about is persuasion. And I want to think about how we design specifically to change user behavior. Now, I'm going to start with an obvious statement here, which is that all design changes behavior. By its very nature, design changes how the people who interact with the thing that we have designed behave. It all changes behavior. But what user experience design promises is that that behavior change can be deliberate. We can consider it, we can identify the behavior that we want to encourage, and we can design for that behavior. And when it comes to thinking about how we design for that behavior, the best place to start is the global organization who for 20 years have been thinking about the science of persuasion design, and that is Stanford University's Design Persuasion Lab. And it's a pretty cool looking place if you ask me. But the founder and director of the Persuasive Technology Lab is a guy called BJ Fogg. And we're going to say a little bit more about Fogg in a moment, but he wrote the Persuasive Technology book in 2002, which began to think about some of the techniques that we can use to start to persuade users to act in a certain way. And the second person that I want to introduce you to isn't part of the Stanford Persuasion Design Lab, but does bring some very important thinking to the whole process. And that is a guy called Robert Cialdini. And Professor Cialdini has written, really his seminal book is a couple of decades old. It's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And he wrote one maybe 5 years ago called Persuasion, which is a complement to the book. And what Cialdini is asking is, in simple terms, how do we persuade people? If we want someone to behave in a certain way, how do we go about getting the thing that we want? And so the next couple of slides bring together the work of BJ Fogg at the Stanford Persuasion Design Lab and Robert Cialdini, who's a well-known author over the last number of decades. So how do we bring these together, and how do we marry them into conversion rate optimization? So my starting point is the major equation which came out of BJ Fogg's work. And BJ Fogg says that B equals MAP. So what do these things mean? B means behavior, M is motivation, A is ability, and P is prompt. So let's think about this in the context of something like exercise. So your motivation to exercise will include things like the desire for pleasure or pain, hope or fear about your future self, social acceptance or rejection. All of those things motivate you or I to exercise. Our ability to exercise all relates to our perception of things like time, money, effort, cognitive load, how well it fits with our routine, and so on. Those things all relate to ability. So what about prompts? Well, prompts are things like reminders or facilitators, or an unfortunate experience using the bathroom scales, or an unfortunate experience involving a mirror. Those things are all prompts. And so what BJ Fogg says is that our behavior, in other words, whether we exercise or not, is a function of those other three things. So if you take a really popular app like Couch to 5K, or you take an app for someone who's maybe more involved in athletic endeavor like Strava, baked into the heart of both of those products, particularly Couch to 5K, is a constant pursuit of answering the questions: what is the motivation, what is the ability, and what is the prompt? Because if we ask the questions in the right way, we can start to explore, how can we increase motivation? We can start to explore, how can we make this accessible to potential athletes with little ability? We can explore what prompts, what little nudges can we give these people that will encourage them to exercise. So this gives us a framework for decision making. And what this means is that we can bring these together and give ourselves a model for thinking about conversion. So let's look at how we could maybe illustrate this in a graph. So on the left-hand side of the graph, we have motivation, which is going to be low to high. In the bottom of the graph, we have ability. Something's going to be either hard or something is going to be easy. And the critical part of the graph is what we call the activation threshold. And that is this line that determines whether the user will behave a certain way or not. And to complete the graph, below the line, prompts will fail, and above the line, prompts will succeed. So we want to make sure that we are designing products which increase and enhance motivation. We need to make sure that we're designing products which people with lower ability find easy to use, because every time we do those things, we increase the chance of bumping the user from below the activation threshold to above the activation threshold. And when we get that right, we can then introduce those prompts, which just give the user the little nudges, which then cause them to act based on their motivation and their ability. Now, when we think about our job in that way, it allows us to humanize the design process. It allows us to look at the e-commerce flow that the Eisenberg brothers developed in the 1990s, and it allows us to apply some human thinking to that, to bring together the three things we've talked about, to bring together the problem-solving aspect that we looked at in the first section, to bring together the deconstruction bit in the second section, and in the third section, this persuasion design element, we can bring those together. And when we bring those together, we can start to fill out a framework that begins to look like this. It allows us to explore motivation, ability, and prompt, and break that down. So here's what that means. The user is interested in the product and prefers it to competitors. The user can carry out the task. The user responds to a trigger that causes the initial interest. We can then apply Robert Cialdini's 6 principles of influence and persuasion that you can see here. Reciprocity. I will give you my attention if you don't waste my time, is what all users think all the time. that it's consistent with people's values, that it's shown to be scarce, that people need to act on it because it's in demand, that there's social proof, that the content is authoritative, that the tone of voice is one that the user can like. We also need to make sure that the task is easy to complete, which impacts usability, user flow, user journeys, navigation, calls to action, clarity of process. And then the final thing is that we are sensitive to the trigger which causes the interest. So that could be an event such as Mother's Day coming up on Sunday. It could be someone needing new sales leads, or it's something to enter a new market. Now, we bring that together in a single slide because what I hope it does is it shows you how the design process, the problem-solving mindset, the deconstruction of the problems that the site needs to solve for the user, and then these very human persuasion elements, how it brings all of those things together. So that's the theoretical element of how we bring those together for design thinking to positively impact conversion optimization. I'm very aware of time, folks, so let me just finish quickly with a case study, if I may, because I want to show you an example of how we brought all of this together in a piece of work which we did a number of years ago for an organization called APH. And APH stands for Airport Parking and Hotels. APH are the second largest provider of hotels and airport and car parks in airports in the UK. The largest provider is the airports themselves. APH are number 2. The challenge that they asked us to help them solve was to increase mobile conversion. The problem that they wanted solved was for more people to book and pay and be confident of buying a parking space online. So we got to work. And the first thing that we did was we started to deconstruct the problem. We wanted to understand what's going on. So when we looked at conversion on desktop versus mobile, we could see that the mobile conversion funnel narrowed more quickly than the desktop one. And that would be fairly common. But what we noted was that at certain steps of the journey, it narrowed much more quickly. So the first step, it's 5% less. The second step, 35. The third step, about 1. The fourth step, about 7. But what we can see here is this 35% number is massive. It's given us a real clue as to where the likely problem is going to be in the process. Now, once we'd identified that, that then allowed us to go back to our decision-making framework, ask where in the flow is the issue happening, and what are the research methods that are most aligned to the problem that we need to fix in this program of conversion optimization. So we did a number of things. We looked at competitors and comparators. We spent 2 days over in Gatwick at their head office, just listening in on calls and spending time with their call center managers. I would love to say that the call center people that we spoke to were the perfect reflection of diversity and smiley faces that you see on the screen. It wasn't just quite like that, but we did get some really useful insight. One of the critical pieces of insight that we got from the call center is that customers fell into 2 very broad brackets. There was significant deviation in the mindset and motivations and prompts of the users. Now, this next slide, forgive me, is a small bit of an exaggeration, but it's not as exaggerated as you might see, as you might think. There were lots of users, there were significant numbers of people who phoned the APH call center on the way to the airport. They were on the motorway on the way to the airport. They realized that the parking was cheaper if they booked it in advance, and they were phoning to get it sorted because they were on their way. But there was another subset of customers who were super organized. They'd booked a family holiday, they were going next year, they had a little checklist of stuff to get sorted. They'd just booked their flights, and on their list was booking a car park. Now, what was interesting to us was that the questions which the people who were flying today were asking and their motivations for buying were very different to the questions that the people who were flying next year were asking and their motivations to buy. So that instantly told us that the date in which the person was wanting to make the booking was an indicator, a big clue about the content and the flow that we could give them that would ultimately persuade them to complete that journey online. So it was a critical piece of insight that we picked up from the call center. We also carried out some usability testing. We got some really interesting insights there as well. What you can see is that in order to book a car parking spot, the thing to do was to press make a booking. That is what APH wanted the user to do. But 2/3 of users who we tested pressed the button which said airport parking because it is more obvious and straightforward than make a booking. So even though make a booking was prominent and orange, because it was poorly labeled, most users pressed airport parking, which took them down a different route. It took them off the main flow. So there's a really nice example where our recommendation was straightforward. Change the label in the purple button from make a booking to airport parking. So we went through the whole flow and we began to look at the areas where users were getting stuck and some of the issues that we were finding, and we were able to bring them all together. I don't have time, obviously, to go into the detail, but we were able to bring them all together to make a set of recommendations from which we were able to carry out the content audit to say, how can we bring the motivation and the ability and the prompts which have led users to this place, bearing in mind that there were two very different types of user, how can we create flows that will get the greatest number of users to the end of that transaction? And this is one of the final screens that we produced for them, just illustrating some of the key flows that should be there. And the outcome of that work and bringing all of those things together was that happily we were able to improve mobile conversion rate, which started off life at 1.1%, and we got it up to 2.9% by working in collaboration and partnership with the organization there. Okay, thanks for bearing with me, folks. Let me just very quickly summarize the 5 things that I'd love you just to keep in mind as we wrap up. Number 1, please remember your primary job at all times as design professionals is to solve problems. Number 2, get after deconstructing the problem so you understand it in detail. Number 3, determine all of the problems that your product needs to solve. Get after them in detail. The more you know about them, the better you can solve them. Number 4, map out customers' motivations, abilities, and prompts. And then number 5, when you're designing your funnel, whatever your checkout funnel might be, make sure you fill it with insight. Okay. Thank you very much, folks, for sticking with me, and sorry to run a few minutes over time.
Super. Thank you very much, Gareth. Okie doke. We'll spend the next 8 minutes or so just going through a couple of questions. I've picked 3 out. So thanks everyone for popping those in the little question box throughout. All right, Gareth. So the first one is, what is the most effective research method to understand which information customers need when deciding on which products to buy?
I don't think there's a single method that we would recommend. Answering a question like that requires looking at the problem through a number of different lenses and using a number of different methods. So you would certainly want a combination of qualitative and quantitative research, and you would definitely want a combination of attitudinal and observational research. So you would want some data, which you would typically get from the likes of Google Analytics or Hotjar, but you would also want some human stories, which you would get from customer interviews or focus groups. You would then use that to run tests on your site to see their impact. You'd probably do some usability testing, and once you'd done that, you'd begin to see what best performed. So if that's the information that you're going after, don't go after it with a single research method. You gotta get after that in a number of different ways.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next one comes in from Daniel. So Daniel says, I noticed every step recommended user testing apart from fulfillment, which recommended user surveys. Why is that?
Because up to the point of fulfillment, the user is in control. So the user's in control of finding stuff and of selecting things and of deciding things and of checking out. So the user interacts to do all that stuff. But once the user gets that email which says your products are coming, at 5 o'clock tomorrow, then the user can't do anything other than wait for their products. So there's no usability to test. There's no interaction that you can look at. So all you can measure is sentiment rather than behavior, because the user has no behavior to exhibit other than just waiting. So that's why the usability test has turned into a user survey in that last piece.
Super, thank you very much. And last question, if you're ready for it.
Go on, yes.
Super, so this one comes in from Binny. And Binny asks, what can one do if the organization is small scale and doesn't have the budget for research?
I think what I would say is that you might be surprised how readily available some research is, and I use the word some kind of advisedly. So I like the simple idea. There's a phrase in publishing, which says that no draft of a book ever got worse as a result of an encounter with an editor. And it's kind of the same with design. No design ever got worse as a result of an encounter with a user. So even if you can do some research, whilst it's not as good as doing lots of research, it's still better than doing none. So, you know, certain online survey tools are no cost or low cost. Google Analytics is free of charge to build into your site. Many customers will probably speak to you if you ask them for some of their time. Automated usability platforms, whilst we wouldn't recommend them in all circumstances, can allow you to do automated tests for as little as $100 a go. So I do understand that every organization works within kind of time and resource constraints when it comes to research. And I think the challenge that I would set you would be research is online. You can do desk research, you can read, you know, industry research, you can do some of your own primary. It doesn't have to be expensive, but do embrace the simple idea that some research, as long as it's not biased, some research is always better than none.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Super. Well, we've got 4 minutes left and just a couple of other wee bits to get through. So thanks so much, everyone, for all those great questions, for your time this afternoon, and for some of your lovely comments that are coming through in the chat box. If you would like to find out any more information on conversion rate optimization as a service, you can find out more at fathom.pro/CRO, just up on the screen now, or indeed, please feel free to reach out to Gareth and I, and we'll welcome a chat over a coffee. Some of you are already saying you're looking forward to the next webinar. So it is going to be launched hot off the heels of today. It's on the 9th of June, and we're chatting about the state of digital accessibility. So yeah, we'd love and hope to see you all there. And please keep an eye on Twitter just off the back of today to sign up. Very lastly, then, we will follow up with a survey today. We'd love to get your thoughts on how you think today went, and also some of your thoughts on what you would like us to cover in future webinars. So if you can spare 3 minutes, we'd really love and appreciate your feedback on that. So I think that's it. All that's left to say is thank you so much, everyone, for joining us over your lunch. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoon and stay safe.
Thanks very much, folks, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.